He drank from the palace fountain, then heard, "You have no idea what you just became." Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The glimmering spires of Nexus Prime towered above Miles Harper, their crystalline facades reflecting the dual suns of the Andromeda sector as he pushed his cleaning cart along the ornate corridor of the Imperial Palace. Miles had never planned to be a janitor on an alien world. 2 years ago, he had been a struggling biochemistry student on Earth, drowning in student loans and facing a bleak job market. When the Galactic Concordat had announced its work exchange program, it had seemed like the answer to his prayers: room, board, and enough credits to pay off his debts, all for the simple task of maintaining cleanliness in one of the most prestigious buildings in the known universe. Simple, but not easy. The Nexians, the dominant species of this sector, were obsessed with cleanliness and protocol. Their bodies exuded a natural antiseptic that kept their blue-tinted skin immaculate. They regarded humans, with their constant shedding of skin cells and hair, as walking biohazards. The irony that they hired humans as cleaners was not lost on Miles. "Maintenance worker Harper, you have missed a spot," came the familiar, melodic voice of Supervisor Thalen, a tall, willowy Nexian whose cranial ridges pulsed with disapproving purple light. Miles turned, forcing a smile. "My apologies, Supervisor. I'll attend to it immediately." He spotted the nearly invisible smudge on the ornate floor tile, probably left by his own shoe, and bent to clean it. Thalen watched, his 4 eyes blinking in their characteristic asynchronous pattern. "The Celestial Emperor's annual address is tomorrow. The palace must be beyond reproach." "Yes, Supervisor," Miles replied, keeping his tone respectful despite the exhaustion seeping into his bones. He had been working for 14 hours straight, and his throat burned with thirst. But he knew better than to ask for a break. Thalen's communicator chimed. He touched the device embedded in his wrist, and his expression shifted to one of controlled panic. "The delegate from Sector 7 has arrived early. I must attend to them." He fixed all 4 eyes on Miles. "Complete this corridor and the Grand Atrium before your shift ends." "The entire Grand Atrium? But that would take." "Do not question your assignments, Harper." Thalen's cranial ridges pulsed crimson. "Remember your place." As Thalen glided away, Miles sighed and pushed his cart toward the Grand Atrium. His place. He was reminded of it constantly. Humans were newcomers to the galactic community, only discovered 50 years ago, and regarded as primitives by most species. Despite being biochemically compatible with many worlds and atmospheres, a rarity in the galaxy, humans were relegated to the lowest positions in the interstellar hierarchy. The Grand Atrium was as magnificent as it was enormous. Vast columns of iridescent stone stretched up hundreds of meters to a dome of what appeared to be liquid glass, through which the stars shimmered despite the daylight. At the center stood the crown jewel of Nexus Prime, the Eternal Fountain. The fountain was a marvel of both art and technology. Streams of luminescent water danced in complex, ever-changing patterns, forming 3-dimensional images that told the story of the Nexian civilization's rise to galactic prominence. The water itself was said to come from the sacred springs beneath the original Nexian homeworld, transported at immense expense across light years. Miles began his work at the furthest edge of the atrium, methodically cleaning each section of the polished floor. Hours passed as he worked his way toward the center. His water bottle had been empty for some time, and his lips were cracked and dry. The atrium was climate-controlled to Nexian preferences, slightly too warm and too dry for human comfort. By the time he reached the fountain, Miles was fighting dizziness. He glanced around. He was alone in the vast space, all the palace officials busy with preparations elsewhere. The fountain's water glimmered invitingly, casting rainbows across the atrium floor. Miles knew the rules. The fountain was sacred to the Nexians, its water reserved for ceremonial purposes. No off-worlder was permitted to touch it, let alone drink from it. The penalties would be severe. But he was so thirsty. And it was just water, wasn't it? Just a sip to wet his parched throat so he could finish his shift. Before he could reconsider, Miles cupped his hands beneath a small stream at the fountain's edge. The water felt unusually heavy, with an almost silken texture. He brought his hands to his lips and drank. The liquid was cool and sweet, with a faint metallic tang that wasn't unpleasant. Instantly, his thirst subsided, and a curious warmth spread through his chest. Human, what have you done? Miles spun around, droplets of luminescent water spraying from his hands. A Nexian stood at the entrance to the atrium, but not one he recognized. This one was older, his skin a deeper blue than most, with elaborate silver markings covering his visible skin. His robes, unlike the utilitarian garments of the palace staff, were ornate and flowing, marking him as someone of high rank. I'm sorry, Miles stammered, his heart pounding. I was just thirsty and You drank from the eternal fountain, the Nexian said, his voice oddly calm given the circumstances. He approached Miles with a fluid grace that suggested enhanced cybernetic joints, a luxury reserved for the elite. Miles swallowed hard, tasting the lingering sweetness of the water. Yes, sir. I know I shouldn't have. I accept whatever punishment. You have no idea what you just became, the Nexian interrupted, now close enough that Miles could see the intricate patterns in his irises. There was no anger in those eyes, only an intense fascination. What I became, Miles repeated, confusion temporarily overriding his fear. I don't understand. The Nexian glanced around the empty atrium, then leaned closer. That is no ordinary water, human. It is aqua lumina, infused with nanites programmed with the collective knowledge and history of the Nexian people. It is used in our most sacred ceremonies, to pass wisdom to chosen initiates. Miles felt the blood drain from his face. Nanites? I've ingested alien nanotechnology. Indeed. But the fascinating thing is that you still stand before me. The aqua lumina was designed for Nexian physiology. It should have caused catastrophic neural collapse in any other species. The Nexian tilted his head, studying Miles with newfound interest. Yet here you are, apparently unharmed. How do you feel? Now that he mentioned it, Miles did feel strange. The warmth that had spread from his chest had reached his extremities, and there was a peculiar tingling sensation at the base of his skull. I feel different, but not bad. Who are you? I am Archivist Velan, keeper of the Imperial Knowledge Repositories and guardian of the Eternal Fountain. He continued to scrutinize Miles. And you are about to become the center of a most interesting scientific and political situation. Before Miles could respond, a sharp pain lanced through his head. He gasped, clutching at his temples. Images flashed behind his eyes, stars viewed from unfamiliar skies, cities with architecture that defied physics, faces of beings he'd never met but somehow recognized. The integration has begun, Velan said, grasping Miles' arm to steady him. Fascinating. In Nexians, this process takes months of preparation and careful dosing. The pain subsided as quickly as it had come, leaving Miles breathless. What's happening to me? The nanites are attempting to integrate with your neural pathways to impart their stored knowledge, Velan explained. But your brain is not Nexian. The outcome is unpredictable. Is it dangerous? Miles asked, fear edging his voice. Potentially. But I suspect. Velan stopped abruptly as the grand doors to the atrium swished open. Archivist Velan. Supervisor Thalen's voice echoed across the vast space. We did not expect you until tomorrow's ceremony. He hurried toward them, then froze when he saw Miles. Why are you conversing with this maintenance worker? Velan straightened to his full height, his manner shifting from curious to imperious. I was inquiring about the cleanliness protocols for tomorrow's ceremony. The Emperor's address must be perfect. Thalen bowed deeply. Of course, Archivist. Rest assured, everything will be immaculate. See that it is. Velan turned back to Miles, his voice cold and formal now. Continue your duties, worker. Miles nodded, keeping his eyes downcast as protocol demanded. Yes, Archivist. As Thalen led Velan away, the older Nexian glanced back at Miles, a clear warning in his eyes. Say nothing. Miles returned to his cleaning cart, his mind racing. The tingling at the base of his skull had intensified, and he could swear he was beginning to hear whispers, fragments of thoughts not his own. Whatever was happening to him, he suspected his life as a simple maintenance worker had just become infinitely more complicated. Miles stumbled into his quarters in the worker dormitory, barely making it to his bed before his legs gave out. His head pounded with a migraine unlike any he'd ever experienced, and the whispers had grown louder, occasionally coalescing into coherent thoughts in a language he shouldn't understand. His roommate, Tyler Grant, looked up from his tablet. "Whoa, you look like hell. Phelan work you to death again." Something like that, Miles managed, not ready to explain what had really happened. How could he? "Hey, I drank sacred alien water full of nanobots, and now I'm hearing voices." Didn't seem like a great conversation starter. Tyler, another human in the exchange program, worked in the palace kitchens. He tossed Miles a hydration packet. "Here, you're probably dehydrated." Miles caught it reflexively, then stared at the packet. More water. The thought made his stomach turn, but he knew he needed it. He tore it open and took a cautious sip. It tasted flat and lifeless compared to the fountain water. "Thanks," he said, forcing himself to drink more. Tyler returned to his tablet. "Did you hear? The Celestial Emperor's coming for the address tomorrow. First time in person in like 50 years or something." "Really?" Miles tried to focus on the conversation, to anchor himself against the storm in his mind. "Yeah. The palace is crawling with Imperial guards. They're even scanning the kitchen staff. Like any of us could afford to buy a weapon that could hurt one of them." Tyler snorted. Miles closed his eyes, feeling another wave of pain approach. When it hit, it was accompanied by a flood of images. A massive ship the size of a small moon, adorned with markings he now recognized as the Imperial crest, a chamber of breathtaking opulence, and a figure, shrouded in light, whose face he couldn't make out. When the vision subsided, Miles found himself lying flat on his bunk, Tyler standing over him with a worried expression. "Dude, are you okay? You just spaced out and started shaking." Miles sat up slowly. "Just exhausted. I think I'm coming down with something. You should report to medical. If you're contagious." "I'm not," Miles interrupted, more sharply than he intended. "I just need to sleep it off." Tyler looked skeptical but returned to his bunk. "Your call. Just don't blame me if you wake up with a Nexian hazmat team quarantining your ass." Despite his exhaustion, sleep eluded Miles. The whispers in his mind had taken on structure, organizing themselves like data being sorted. Occasionally, a clear thought would emerge in Nexian, a language he had only learned the basics of, yet now understood with increasing fluency. Around midnight, Miles' communicator vibrated with a message, unusual, as his only regular contacts were his supervisor and his family back on Earth. He checked the screen and found a message from an unknown sender. "Medical Base 7, Level 32. Come now. Use service lifts." It had to be Archivist Phelan. No one else knew what had happened. Miles glanced at Tyler, who was now snoring softly. Moving quietly, he changed into fresh clothes and slipped out of their shared quarters. The palace was never truly empty. A structure that housed over 50,000 residents and workers always had someone moving through its corridors, but the night cycle meant the hallways were relatively quiet. Miles kept his head down, projecting the demeanor of someone on legitimate business as he made his way to the service lifts. Level 32 was part of the research wing, an area Miles had never had clearance to enter. He expected to be stopped at any moment, but the sparse security personnel he passed barely glanced at him. Medical Bay 7 was located at the end of a sterile white corridor. The door slid open as he approached, revealing Archivist Phelan standing beside a complex array of medical equipment. "Good. You came," Phelan said, beckoning Miles inside. "I was concerned you might be incapacitated by now." The door sealed behind Miles with a pneumatic hiss. "What's happening to me?" Phelan gestured to an examination platform. "Lie down. I need to scan you." Miles hesitated. "No offense, but I don't know you. Why should I trust you?" A flicker of what might have been respect crossed Phelan's features. "A fair question. You shouldn't trust me, by any reasonable standard. But at this moment, I am the only one who can help you understand what's happening. And I am very curious about how a human body is interacting with technology designed for Nexian physiology." It wasn't exactly reassuring, but Miles had few options. He lay down on the platform. "The nanites in the Aqua Lumina are one of our civilization's most closely guarded technologies," Phelan explained as he activated a scanning field that bathed Miles in blue light. "They are designed to bond with Nexian neural tissue, creating pathways for the direct transmission of knowledge, memory, and experience." Miles watched as holographic displays appeared above him, showing what he assumed was his neural activity. So they're like educational robots. Velan made a sound that might have been a chuckle, a crude but not inaccurate description. In Nexians, the nanites form a secondary neural network that interfaces with our natural brain structure. Through them, an initiate can receive the accumulated wisdom of generations in a matter of weeks, rather than decades of study. The scanner beeped, and Velan studied the results with obvious fascination. Extraordinary. The nanites have completely bypassed your blood-brain barrier, something they shouldn't be able to do in a non-Nexian, and are forming connections throughout your cerebral cortex. Is that bad? Miles asked. It's unprecedented, Velan replied. Your brain chemistry is reacting to the nanites in ways I wouldn't have predicted. Instead of rejecting them, your neural pathways seem to be adapting to them, incorporating them. Another wave of pain washed over Miles, less intense than before, but still disorienting. This time, the images were accompanied by emotions, pride, fear, reverence, all tied to events and places he had never experienced. The knowledge integration is accelerating, Velan observed, watching the displays. You're accessing memories from the collective archive much faster than any Nexian initiate could. When the episode passed, Miles found he could name every star in the Nexian home system and recite the lineage of the imperial family back 20 generations. Knowledge that wasn't his, yet somehow was. Why is this happening? He asked, his voice hoarse. Why am I not dead, if this technology wasn't meant for humans? Velan's expression turned thoughtful. There has always been something unique about human biology. Your species possesses an adaptability that most others lack. Perhaps it's a result of evolving on a planet with such diverse conditions. He adjusted something on his scanner. But I suspect there's more to it. The nanites were programmed to seek compatible neural structures. The fact that they found yours compatible suggests there may be similarities between human and Nexian brains that we've overlooked. Miles sat up slowly, noticing that the whispers in his mind had subsided, replaced by a sort of organized hum. What happens now? Am I going to be arrested for drinking from the fountain? That depends, Velan said, shutting down his equipment. Officially, what you did is a serious transgression. The punishment would be severe. He paused. However, no one knows what happened except you and me, and I find myself more interested in what you're becoming than in seeing you punished. What I'm becoming, Miles repeated. You said that before. What exactly am I becoming? Velan's four eyes fixed on him with unnerving intensity. I don't know, but I intend to find out. For now, return to your quarters. Act normally. I will contact you again when it's safe. Miles stood, steadier on his feet than he expected. Why are you helping me? What's in it for you? Knowledge, Velan replied simply. In all my centuries as archivist, I have never encountered anything like this. And knowledge, human, is the only currency that truly matters. As Miles turned to leave, Velan added, one more thing. The Emperor's address tomorrow, do not attend. I'm scheduled to clean the observation gallery, Miles said. Find an excuse. Claim illness, you certainly look the part. But stay away from the grand atrium tomorrow. There was something in Velan's tone that sent a chill down Miles' spine. The events that will unfold there are not ones you should witness. What events? Miles asked. But Velan merely turned away, his attention already on the data he had collected. Go now, and speak of this to no one. Miles awoke the next morning with a clarity he had never experienced. The migraine was gone, replaced by a strange sense of heightened awareness. The whispers had organized themselves into what felt like a library in his mind, vast repositories of knowledge he could access with a thought. You look better, Tyler remarked as they dressed for their shifts. Still think you should have gone to medical, though. I feel better, Miles said, which wasn't exactly a lie. Physically, he felt fine, better than fine. It was the implications of what was happening to him that were terrifying. Tyler pulled on his kitchen uniform. So are you working the big address today? I got assigned to the reception afterward. Preparing food no one's going to eat while the bigwigs discuss whatever it is they discuss. Miles remembered Velan's warning. Actually, I think I might still be contagious. Going to request a different assignment. Your funeral? Tyler shrugged. Phelan's going to flip out if you bail on the atrium duty. I'll manage, Miles said, hoping it was true. As they left their quarters, Miles became aware of something odd. He could sense the technology around him in a way he never had before. The environmental systems, the security scanners, even the simple lighting panels, all seemed to whisper their functions to him. It was as if the nanites had attuned him to the electronic pulse of the palace itself. When he reached the maintenance department, Miles found Supervisor Thalen in a state of controlled panic. The Nexian was barking orders at a group of workers, his cranial ridges flashing rapidly between colors. "Harper, there you are. The ceremonial attendants are short-staffed. You've been reassigned to the Grand Atrium Service Team for the Emperor's address." Miles felt his stomach drop. "Sir, I'm not feeling well. I think I might be." "I don't care if you're dying, Harper," Thalen snapped. "This is the Emperor. Do you understand? The Emperor. Every available worker is being deployed." He thrust a bundle of formal service attire into Miles' arms. "Put these on and report to the atrium preparation area in 20 minutes. So much for avoiding the atrium." Miles took the bundle, his mind racing. Why had Velan warned him to stay away? What was going to happen at the Emperor's address? As he changed into the formal service attire, a silvery gray tunic and trousers that were considerably nicer than his usual maintenance uniform, Miles tried to search through the new knowledge in his mind. There were fragments about the Emperor, about ceremonial protocols, about the symbolic significance of the eternal fountain, but nothing that suggested danger. Unless the danger came from Miles himself. The thought stopped him cold. What if the nanites were doing more than imparting knowledge? What if they were reprogramming him in some way? But he felt no malicious impulses, no sudden urge to harm anyone. Just an overwhelming influx of information and a growing sense that he was seeing the world differently than he had before. The atrium preparation area was a hive of activity when Miles arrived. Workers of various species, though predominantly Nexian, rushed about, arranging seating, testing environmental controls, and securing the perimeter under the watchful eyes of Imperial guards. The guards were imposing figures, their exoskeletal armor making them appear more machine than organic. "You, human," a Nexian coordinator called, beckoning to Miles. "You'll be stationed beside the south entrance. Your job is to remain invisible unless summoned to provide refreshments to the diplomatic corps. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make eye contact with any dignitary above level 3 clearance." "Is that clear?" "Yes, ma'am," Miles responded automatically. "Good. Take position and await further instructions." Miles moved to the designated spot, a discreet alcove near one of the atrium's smaller entrances. From here, he had a clear view of the central platform where the Emperor would deliver his address, and of the eternal fountain behind it. As he watched the final preparations, Miles noticed something strange about the fountain. Its patterns seemed different today, more complex, almost agitated. And there was something about the central control mechanism, a subtle irregularity that he couldn't quite identify, but somehow sensed was wrong. Before he could consider this further, a hush fell over the atrium. The main doors swung open, and the first of the dignitaries began to arrive, representatives from various worlds and species, all dressed in their ceremonial best. Miles stood at attention, trying to appear as unremarkable as possible. But as the atrium filled, he found himself recognizing faces he had never seen before, placing names to species he had never studied. The nanite's knowledge was becoming more accessible by the minute. "Psst, Harper." Miles glanced to his right to see Tyler slipping into the alcove beside him, carrying a tray of delicate crystalline glasses filled with a shimmering liquid. "Tyler, what are you doing here?" Miles whispered. "Got pulled from the reception to serve during the address," Tyler replied, looking uncomfortable in his formal attire. "These are ceremonial toast glasses for after the Emperor's speech. Pretty sure they cost more than I'll earn in a lifetime." Miles noticed the liquid in the glasses was the same luminescent water from the fountain, aqua lumina. "Be careful with those," he warned. Tyler rolled his eyes. "No kidding. Spill this stuff, and they'll probably space me." He shifted nervously. "Have you seen him yet?" "The Emperor? Not yet, I think." Miles' response was cut off by the sound of trumpets, or something like them, announcing a new arrival. The assembled dignitaries turned as one toward the grand entrance, where a procession of Imperial guards had formed an honor corridor. Through this corridor walked the most imposing Nexian Miles had ever seen. Nearly 7 feet tall, With skin so dark blue it was almost black, the celestial emperor of the Nexian dominion moved with fluid grace. Unlike other Nexians, whose cranial ridges pulsed with colors that betrayed their emotions, the emperor's ridges glowed with a constant, unwavering white light. As the emperor approached the central platform, Miles felt a sudden pressure in his mind, a flood of information trying to surface all at once. Images of the emperor in different settings, snippets of speeches, diplomatic negotiations, military commands, and something darker, something the Nanites seemed reluctant to reveal. "You okay?" Tyler whispered, noticing Miles' discomfort. "Fine," Miles managed through gritted teeth. "Just nervous." The emperor reached the platform and raised his hands in greeting. The assembled crowd bowed in unison, a ripple of deference that swept through the atrium. "Esteemed representatives of the Galactic Concordat," the emperor began, his voice resonant and commanding. "We gather today to celebrate 5 centuries of peace and prosperity under the guidance of the Nexian Dominion." As the emperor spoke, Miles found his attention drawn again to the eternal fountain. The irregularity he had noticed earlier was more pronounced now, a disruption in the flow patterns that shouldn't be possible given the fountain's design. And then he understood. The fountain had been tampered with. The realization came from the Nanites' knowledge, from technical specifications and security protocols that had been embedded in the aqua lumina. The fountain's control system had been modified to alter the composition of the water, to transform it from a medium for knowledge into something else entirely. Miles scanned the crowd, looking for Archivist Velan. He spotted him standing near the front, his expression grave as he, too, watched the fountain with obvious concern. "Today marks not just a celebration of our past," the Emperor continued, "but the dawn of a new era. An era in which the Nexian Dominion will secure its rightful place as the supreme power in the galaxy." A murmur ran through the crowd, diplomats exchanging puzzled glances. This was not the message of peaceful cooperation they had expected. For too long, we have allowed lesser species to believe themselves our equals. For too long, we have constrained our true potential in the name of harmony. The Emperor's voice hardened. "That ends today." Miles felt his heart racing. This was why Velan had warned him to stay away. Something was very wrong. The Emperor gestured grandly, and the fountain behind him surged, its streams reaching higher, glowing more intensely. "The aqua lumina has long been our greatest gift to those we deemed worthy of Nexian wisdom. Today, it becomes the instrument of our ascension." With mounting horror, Miles watched as the fountain's waters began to atomize, forming a fine mist that drifted over the assembled dignitaries. The diplomats looked up in confusion, some with expressions of wonder, others with growing alarm. "What's happening?" Tyler whispered, clutching his tray of ceremonial glasses. Miles knew, thanks to the Nanites. The modified aqua lumina wasn't imparting knowledge, it was rewriting neural pathways, overriding free will. The Emperor was attempting to turn the gathered representatives of the galaxy's most powerful worlds into puppets loyal to the Nexian Dominion. It was a coup on a galactic scale. "The water," Miles said urgently. "It's been weaponized. We need to get out of here." Tyler stared at him in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Before Miles could explain, he noticed Archivist Velan moving purposefully through the crowd toward a control panel hidden in one of the atrium's decorative columns. The older Nexian's intentions were clear. He was trying to shut down the fountain. But he wouldn't reach it in time. Already, some of the diplomats exposed to the mist were swaying on their feet, their eyes glazing over. Miles made a split-second decision. He grabbed one of the ceremonial glasses from Tyler's tray. "What are you doing?" Tyler hissed. "Are you crazy?" Miles ignored him, his focus entirely on what he needed to do. The Nanites in his system had given him knowledge, but now they were giving him something else: access. He could sense the fountain's control systems, could interface with them in a way no ordinary human could. But he needed to be closer. Clutching the glass of aqua lumina, Miles slipped from the alcove and moved toward the central platform. Security was focused on the Emperor and the increasingly chaotic crowd. No one noticed a single human service worker. The Emperor was still speaking, his voice rising in triumph as his plan unfolded. "A new order rises today, a Nexian order that will guide the galaxy with a single, united purpose." Miles reached the edge of the platform. The fountain's control panel was just a few meters away, but guards flanked it on both sides. He wouldn't be able to reach it without being seen. But maybe he didn't need to. The nanites in his system had formed connections not just with his brain, but throughout his body. And the aqua lumina in the glass he held contained more nanites, ones not yet programmed for their new, sinister purpose. Miles concentrated, reaching out with his mind toward the liquid in the glass. To his amazement, he felt the nanites respond, recognizing him as a compatible host. With a thought, he imprinted them with new instructions, counter-commands to the Emperor's reprogramming. Then, in one fluid motion, he hurled the contents of the glass into the fountain. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the fountain's glow flickered, shifting from its intense white to a softer blue. The mist being dispersed over the crowd changed in composition, the weaponized nanites neutralized by Miles' improvised countermeasure. The Emperor whirled around, his perfect composure fracturing as he saw what was happening. Guards, seize that human. Miles backed away as Imperial guards converged on his position. He had disrupted the Emperor's plan, but he was now trapped in the atrium with no escape route. A hand grabbed his arm, pulling him behind a column. It was Archivist Velan. Impressive, the Archivist said, his eyes on the fountain, which was now pulsing erratically as Miles' reprogrammed nanites battled the Emperors. You've done what I couldn't, but we need to get you out of here. What's happening? Miles demanded. Why is the Emperor trying to mind control the Concordat? A question for another time, Velan replied, guiding Miles toward a concealed door. Right now, we need to. The Archivist's words were cut off as the entire atrium shuddered. The fountain's unstable energy patterns had created a cascade effect, disrupting the palace's power systems. Chaos erupted. Diplomats ran for the exits as Imperial guards tried to maintain order. The Emperor stood on the platform, shouting commands that went unheeded in the pandemonium. This way, Velan urged, pulling Miles through the hidden door into a narrow corridor. The maintenance tunnels can get you to the loading bays. From there, you might find transport off-world. Off-world? I can't just leave. What about Tyler? The other humans here? Miles protested. They will be safe enough. It's you the Emperor will hunt now. Velan's expression was grim. You've done something no one thought possible. You've interfaced with our most sacred technology and used it against us. The Emperor will never allow you to live. Another tremor shook the palace. The lights flickered. The destabilization is spreading, Velan said. The palace's systems are more interconnected than the Emperor realized. His tampering with the fountain has compromised everything. He pressed a small device into Miles' hand. Coordinates to a safe house on Terran Colony Epsilon. People there who will help you understand what you've become. What I've become? Miles echoed. You keep saying that. What exactly am I now? Velan's four eyes fixed on him with an expression that might have been awe. The first of something new. A human with the collective knowledge of Nexian civilization and the ability to interface with our technology in ways even we cannot. You're a bridge between our species, and possibly the only hope for preventing the war the Emperor has been planning. War. Miles felt cold despite the warmth of the maintenance tunnel. Against Earth. Against everyone. The Nexian supremacy movement has been growing for decades, but few realized how far it had infiltrated the upper echelons of our government. Velan checked a display on his wrist. The diplomatic corps will be evacuating soon. If you can reach the landing bays in the confusion. The wall beside them exploded inward, showering them with debris. Through the dust stepped two Imperial guards, their weapons trained on Miles and Velan. Archivist Velan, one of them intoned. You are charged with treason against the celestial throne. The human is to be terminated. Velan stepped in front of Miles. This human is under my protection as archivist. By ancient law, you cannot. The guard fired. A beam of energy struck Velan in the chest, sending him crumpling to the ground. No, Miles cried, dropping to his knees beside the fallen archivist. Velan clutched Miles' arm, his voice barely a whisper. Run. Tell them what you've learned. What you've become. His eyes closed. Miles looked up at the guards, who were now aiming their weapons at him. Time seemed to slow as the nanites in his system responded to his surge of adrenaline, enhancing his perception and processing speed. He could see the energy building in their weapons, could almost trace the path the beams would take. And more than that, he could sense the guards' exoskeletal armor, the servo mechanisms, the power sources, the control systems. Without fully understanding how, Miles reached out with his mind, the nanites extending his consciousness into the guards' technology. He found vulnerabilities, exploited them with thoughts that translated instantaneously into commands. The guards' armor locked up, servos freezing mid-motion, rendering them immobile. Their weapons powered down, energy dispersing harmlessly. Miles stared at his hands, then at the paralyzed guards. He had done that. With a thought. No time to process what it meant. He could hear more guards approaching. Giving Veland's body one last pained look, Miles sprinted down the maintenance tunnel, letting the nanites guide him through the labyrinthine passages of the palace. He emerged in a massive hangar bay, where diplomatic vessels were being hurriedly boarded as their crews prepared for emergency departure. The bay was chaos, staff running in all directions, security trying to maintain order, alarms blaring as the palace's systems continued to destabilize. Miles spotted a small transport ship with Terran markings. Human diplomatic staff were boarding, looking frightened and confused. If he could reach them, blend in. As he moved toward the ship, a voice rang out behind him. "Stop that human." Miles turned to see the Emperor himself striding into the hangar, flanked by a phalanx of guards. The Nexian ruler's cranial ridges now pulsed with furious red light, his perfect composure shattered. "Seize him. He has stolen our sacred technology," the Emperor commanded. Guards rushed forward. Diplomats scattered. Miles ran for the Terran ship, whose entry ramp was beginning to close. "Wait," he shouted, waving desperately at the human crew members visible in the doorway. "I'm Terran. Let me in." One of the crew hesitated, then extended a hand to help him aboard. Miles leapt for the ramp, fingers grasping those of his fellow human. Energy beams sizzled past him as the guards opened fire. The crewman pulled him inside, and the ramp sealed shut behind him. "What the hell is going on?" the crewman demanded as the ship's engines roared to life. "Why are the Nexians shooting at their own palace?" "It's complicated," Miles gasped, collapsing against the bulkhead. "Very complicated." Through the viewport, he watched as the magnificent palace receded, smoke now billowing from several sections. The eternal fountain, visible through the great dome of the grand atrium, was a churning maelstrom of light and energy, no longer a symbol of Nexian wisdom, but of their overreach. As the ship broke atmosphere, joining dozens of other diplomatic vessels fleeing the planet, Miles felt the weight of what had happened and what was still to come. He had knowledge the Emperor would kill to suppress. He had abilities no human was ever meant to possess. And he had become, inadvertently, a key player in a conflict that could engulf the galaxy. All because he'd been thirsty enough to drink from a fountain. Terran Colony Epsilon was a far cry from the gleaming spires of Nexus Prime. Established only 15 years earlier, it was a frontier settlement, pragmatic, utilitarian, and distinctly human in its chaotic energy. The diplomatic ship had dropped Miles at the colony's main spaceport 3 days after their hasty departure from the Nexian homeworld. The ship's captain, after hearing Miles' abbreviated version of events, had agreed to list him as a diplomatic assistant being reassigned. It wouldn't fool the Emperor's agents for long, but it bought him time. Using the coordinates Veland had given him, Miles made his way through the bustling streets of New Seattle, the colony's capital. The city was a curious blend of Earth architecture and alien materials, with buildings that looked like they'd been transplanted from the Pacific Northwest, but constructed from iridescent metals and translucent composites. The safe house turned out to be an unassuming research facility on the outskirts of the city, its entrance concealed behind what appeared to be a standard atmospheric processing plant. Miles approached cautiously, aware that he was being observed by hidden security systems. A door slid open before he could knock, revealing a human woman in her 50s, her graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Miles Harper," she said, not a question but a confirmation. "Archivist Veland said you might come, though he expected to be with you." Her eyes narrowed. "Where is he?" Miles felt a pang of grief. "Dead. The Emperor's guards killed him while helping me escape." The woman's expression hardened. "I see. Then our situation is even more precarious than we thought." She stepped aside. "Come in. I'm Dr. Emily Parker, Director of Xenobiological Research here on Epsilon. Miles entered a facility far more advanced than its exterior suggested. The main chamber was filled with cutting-edge medical and research equipment, much of it appearing to be a hybrid of human and alien technology. Velan said there were people here who could help me understand what I've become, Miles said, looking around. Is that you? In part, Dr. Parker replied. Velan and I have been corresponding for years, one of the few Nexians willing to collaborate equally with humans. We've been studying the compatibility between human and Nexian physiology, trying to understand why our species can share so many worlds despite evolving in completely different star systems. She led him to a diagnostic chamber. When he contacted me about what happened to you, I couldn't believe it. No non-Nexian has ever successfully integrated with Aqua Lumina. Successfully? Miles questioned as she gestured for him to sit on an examination table. How many unsuccessful attempts have there been? Dr. Parker's silence was answer enough. So I should be dead, Miles concluded. By all previous understanding, yes. She activated a scanner that bathed him in green light. The nanites in Aqua Lumina are programmed to bond only with Nexian neural patterns. In other species, they typically cause cascading neural failure. Essentially, they destroy the brain trying to find compatible structures. Miles watched as holographic displays appeared around him, showing what he assumed was his neural activity. Even with his limited medical knowledge, he could see it was anything but normal. Extraordinary, Dr. Parker murmured, studying the displays. The nanites haven't just integrated with your neural pathways, they're enhancing them, creating new connections. Your brain is processing information at rates that should be impossible for a human. I can feel it, Miles admitted. It's like having a library and a supercomputer in my head. I know things I never learned. I can understand technologies I've never studied. He hesitated. And I can interact with Nexian systems. Control them, somehow. Dr. Parker's eyes widened. You've developed a neural interface capability? Without implants. Is that what it is? I don't know the terminology. I just know that when I focus on Nexian tech, I can sense how it works, and sometimes I can make it do what I want. This changes everything, Dr. Parker said, excitement evident in her voice despite her attempt at clinical detachment. Velan was right. You're not just a curiosity, you're a potential game changer. For what game? Miles asked, growing uneasy with her enthusiasm. The Emperor tried to brainwash the entire Galactic Concordat. Velan said he's planning a war. What exactly am I in the middle of? Dr. Parker shut down the scanners and sat on a stool facing him. A conflict that's been brewing for decades. The Nexians discovered Earth 50 years ago, but they've known about us for much longer. They've been studying us, monitoring our development from a distance. Why? Miles asked. Because they're afraid of us. Came a new voice from the doorway. Miles turned to see a man in his 60s, wearing a Terran Defense Force uniform adorned with the insignia of a high-ranking officer. General Hayes, Dr. Parker acknowledged with a nod. I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow. Plans change, the general replied, his gaze fixed on Miles. Especially when the Nexian homeworld goes into lockdown and diplomatic relations with the entire Concordat are suspended. He approached Miles, studying him with keen interest. So you're the janitor who threw the Emperor's palace into chaos. Miles stood, oddly compelled to face this man on equal footing. I was just trying to stop him from mind-controlling every diplomat in the atrium. And succeeded, by all accounts, Hayes said, something like approval in his voice. Though reports of how you did it vary wildly. Care to explain? Miles glanced at Dr. Parker, who gave him a subtle nod. He took a deep breath and recounted the events at the palace. Drinking from the fountain, his encounter with Velan, the Emperor's attempted coup, and his improvised countermeasure. When he finished, Hayes was silent for a long moment. Then, you interfaced with their technology. Mentally. Without training or implants. Yes, sir, Miles confirmed. Show me, Hayes challenged. Miles looked around the lab until his gaze settled on a device he recognized as Nexian manufacture, a communication node similar to those used in the palace. He focused on it, letting his consciousness extend as it had in the palace. The nanites responded, creating a bridge between his thoughts and the device's operating system. The node activated, its display lighting up with Nexian symbols that shifted and changed at Miles' direction. Hayes watched, his expression a mixture of awe and calculation. Dr. Parker, I think we need to accelerate Project Prometheus. Dr. Parker frowned. General, we've only just begun to understand what's happened to Mr. Harper. Rushing this could. We don't have time for caution, Hayes interrupted. The Emperor has dropped all pretense of diplomacy. Nexian warships are mobilizing throughout the sector. Intelligence suggests they're planning a first strike against Terran colonies, possibly Earth itself. Miles' blood ran cold. Because of what I did. No, Hayes said firmly. What you did merely accelerated their timeline. This has been coming since they first discovered us. His expression darkened. The Nexians have ruled the galaxy for 5 centuries because of their technological superiority. But humans adapt faster, innovate more rapidly. Given enough time, we would inevitably challenge their dominance. The Emperor knows this. So Velan was right, Miles said quietly. It is about war. It's about survival, Hayes corrected. Ours and theirs. And you, Mr. Harper, may have just given us the edge we need. Dr. Parker stood. Miles needs time to process what's happening to him. The neural integration is still ongoing. Pushing him too hard, too fast could cause irreparable damage. We don't have the luxury of time, Doctor, Hayes replied, though his tone softened. But you're right that we need him functional. He turned to Miles. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, we'll see exactly what you're capable of. As Hayes left, Miles sank back onto the examination table, the weight of everything crashing down on him. 2 weeks ago, he had been a janitor worried about student loans. Now he was at the center of an interstellar conflict, his mind transformed by alien technology, carrying knowledge that could determine the fate of humanity. I never asked for any of this, he said softly. Dr. Parker's expression was sympathetic. Few who change history ever do. The next morning, Miles found himself in a secure testing facility beneath the research center. The chamber was a stark, white room filled with various pieces of Nexian technology, communications arrays, data terminals, and what appeared to be weapons systems, all isolated from external networks. General Hayes watched from an observation booth as Dr. Parker attached monitoring devices to Miles' temples and wrists. These will help us understand how your brain is interfacing with the nanites, she explained. We need to establish baselines for your capabilities. Miles nodded, trying to ignore the growing pressure in his skull. The nanites' integration had accelerated overnight, flooding his consciousness with more Nexian knowledge, technical specifications, military protocols, strategic assessments of various species, including detailed analyses of human weaknesses. Let's start with something simple, Dr. Parker said, indicating a basic Nexian data terminal. Try to access its memory core. Miles focused on the terminal, extending his consciousness as he had before. The connection formed almost instantly, far faster than it had in the palace. He found himself navigating through the terminal's systems with intuitive ease, as if he'd been designed to interface with it. I'm in, he said, surprised by how natural it felt. I can see everything: file structures, security protocols, system architecture. Try extracting a specific file, Dr. Parker suggested. There's a document labeled Concordat Treaty Section 7. Can you find it? Miles navigated the system, locating the file within seconds. Got it. Want me to display it? Yes. With a thought, Miles transferred the document to the terminal's display screen. The text appeared instantly, a perfect retrieval. Impressive. Hayes' voice came through the speakers. Now try something more complex. The weapons system on your right is Nexian anti-personnel technology, currently deactivated. Can you bring its targeting systems online without physically touching it? Miles turned to the sleek, angular device. This was different, not just accessing information, but actually activating hardware. He hesitated. It's completely isolated, Dr. Parker assured him. No power source connected. Even if you activate it, it can't fire. Nodding, Miles concentrated on the weapon. This connection was more challenging, requiring greater focus. He could sense the system's dormant circuitry, the pathways that would normally channel energy. With careful mental pressure, he triggered the initialization sequence. The weapon hummed to life, its targeting array glowing as it swiveled to lock onto the nearest heat signature, Miles himself. Holy shit, he muttered, taking an involuntary step back. Deactivate it, Hayes ordered. Miles complied, severing the mental connection. The weapon powered down immediately. You did that without any physical interface, Dr. Parker said, checking her instruments. The nanites are somehow transmitting your neural commands as valid Nexian authentication signals. She looked at him with renewed fascination. This goes beyond anything we thought possible with current technology. Tests continued throughout the day, each one pushing the boundaries of Miles' abilities. He accessed encrypted databases, operated environmental systems, and even briefly took control of a Nexian maintenance drone, making it hover and move according to his thoughts. By late afternoon, Miles was exhausted, his head pounding from the constant mental exertion. Dr. Parker called for a break, despite Hayes' obvious desire to continue. He's not a machine, General, she said firmly. The nanites may be enhancing his capabilities, but he's still human. His brain needs time to recover. Hayes reluctantly agreed, and Miles was led to a small break room where food and water had been provided. As he ate, he contemplated everything he had learned, not just from the tests, but from the continuing integration of Nexian knowledge. Something was bothering him, a pattern emerging from the fragments of information in his mind. The Nexians' fear of humanity wasn't just about potential technological competition. There was something more specific, something they had discovered about human biology that had terrified them. When Dr. Parker entered the break room, Miles voiced his suspicion. The Nexians found something about us, didn't they? Something in our DNA or our brain structure. That's why they've been watching us for so long. Dr. Parker hesitated, then sat across from him. You're right. Velan shared this with me years ago, though the information was highly classified within Nexian society. She lowered her voice, though they were alone. Human neural architecture has remarkable similarities to ancient Nexian patterns, not current Nexians, but their evolutionary ancestors from millennia ago. Miles frowned. That's impossible. We evolved on different planets, in different star systems. Exactly, Dr. Parker said. It should be impossible. Unless we're related somehow. Miles finished, the implications dawning on him. Are you saying humans and Nexians share a common ancestor? That we're what? Distant cousins. The evidence suggests something even more profound, Dr. Parker said carefully. The Nexians believe that humans might be their evolutionary future. Miles stared at her. What? Nexian civilization is ancient. They've been technologically advanced for over 10,000 years. During that time, they've augmented themselves extensively, integrating technology with biology to the point that modern Nexians are significantly different from their original form. Like the nanites, Miles said, beginning to understand. Exactly. For generations, Nexian children have been receiving nanite infusions from birth, subtly altering their development. Over time, this created a dependency. Modern Nexians cannot function without their technological enhancements. Their natural evolutionary path was interrupted, redirected. But what does this have to do with humans? Dr. Parker leaned forward. Genetic studies suggest that if the Nexians had continued to evolve naturally, without technological intervention, they might have developed along lines remarkably similar to humans. We represent what they might have become, more adaptable, more innovative, less dependent on technology, but more capable of creating and controlling it. The implications were staggering. So when I drank the aqua lumina, the nanites found neural structures they recognized as compatible, not because you're like modern Nexians, but because you represent the potential they abandoned millennia ago. Dr. Parker's eyes shone with excitement. You're the bridge, Miles. The missing link between what they were and what they could have been. Before Miles could process this revelation, an alarm blared throughout the facility. General Hayes burst into the break room, his expression grim. We need to move. Now. Nexian strike force in orbit. They've tracked you here. Miles stood. How? I was careful. The nanites, Dr. Parker realized, horror dawning on her face. They must be emitting some kind of signal. We should have thought of that. Hayes was already moving toward the exit. No time for recriminations. We have a safe room 3 levels down. This way. They hurried through the facility, which was now in full evacuation mode. Research staff rushed to secure sensitive materials and data as security personnel took up defensive positions. What about the colony? Miles asked as they descended in a secure elevator. There are thousands of civilians here. The Nexians won't risk open warfare yet, Hayes replied, though he looked far from certain. This is a surgical strike. They want you, not a full-scale conflict. The elevator doors opened onto a reinforced bunker built into the bedrock beneath the research center. Banks of monitors showed security feeds from throughout the facility and the surrounding area. On one screen, Miles could see Nexian dropships descending through Epsilon's atmosphere, their sleek, predatory shapes unmistakable. Another screen showed Imperial guards deploying around the perimeter of the research center, their movements precise and coordinated. They're not here to take prisoners, Hayes observed grimly. Those are execution squads. Miles watched the screens, a cold realization settling over him. They're here for me. If I leave, they might spare the rest of you. Don't be noble, Harper, Hayes snapped. You're too valuable to sacrifice. Valuable for what? Miles demanded. As a weapon? Is that what Project Prometheus is? Turning me into some kind of asset to use against the Nexians? Hayes didn't deny it. You have unique capabilities that could give humanity a fighting chance. We're not the aggressors here, but we'll damn well defend ourselves. Before Miles could respond, one of the security feeds went static. Then another, and another. They're breaching the outer defenses, a technician reported. Hayes turned to Dr. Parker. Initiate Protocol Omega. All research data is to be purged rather than risk capture. Dr. Parker hesitated only briefly before moving to a terminal and beginning the data destruction sequence. Miles watched the remaining security feeds with growing dread. The Imperial guards were moving through the facility with ruthless efficiency, neutralizing human security personnel without hesitation. It wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter, and it was happening because of him. In that moment, something shifted in Miles' perspective. The Nexian knowledge within him, previously fragmented and chaotic, suddenly aligned into a coherent whole. He understood, with perfect clarity, what he needed to do. I can stop this, he said quietly. Hayes turned to him. How? You're not a soldier, Harper. No, Miles agreed. I'm something else entirely. He moved to a communications terminal. I need to broadcast a message to the Nexian strike force. Absolutely not, Hayes objected. You'll give away our position. They already know where we are, Miles countered. They're just taking their time to be thorough. But I can end this without further bloodshed. Dr. Parker studied his face. You've realized something. The integration has progressed further. Miles nodded. I understand now what Villain meant. What I've become. And I think I know why the Emperor is so afraid. Before Hayes could object further, Dr. Parker moved to the communications terminal. Do it. Whatever you're planning, it can't be worse than watching our people die. Miles placed his hands on the terminal, but he didn't need the physical interface. His consciousness extended through the facility's systems, finding the communication array and reconfiguring it to broadcast on Nexian military frequencies. This is Miles Harper, he transmitted in perfect Nexian language. The human who drank from the eternal fountain. I wish to speak with the commander of this strike force. For long moments, there was no response. Then the largest screen in the bunker flickered, and the image of a Nexian officer appeared, distinguished by the elaborate markings on his exoskeletal armor and the cold determination in his 4 eyes. Human, the commander acknowledged. You have caused quite a disturbance in the Dominion. The Emperor himself has ordered your elimination. I'm aware, Miles replied. But before you continue your attack, there's something you should know. Something the Emperor hasn't told you about why he fears me. The commander's cranial ridges pulsed with skepticism. The Emperor fears nothing, least of all a human. Then why send an execution squad rather than a capture team? Miles challenged. Why risk diplomatic incident and potential war just to eliminate one maintenance worker? He didn't wait for an answer. Because I've become living proof of what the Imperial family has hidden for generations, that humans represent the true evolutionary destiny of the Nexian people. The commander's ridges flashed with alarm, then anger. Blasphemy. The Nexian form is the pinnacle of evolution, perfected through millennia of technological enhancement. Is it? Miles asked. Or is it a dead end, a path that has left your species dependent on technology to the point where you can no longer adapt naturally? The nanites in the Aqua Lumina were designed to bond only with Nexian neural patterns. Yet they bonded with mine. Ask yourself why. Uncertainty flickered across the commander's features. What are you suggesting, human? I'm suggesting that the Emperor's fear goes beyond military strategy. He's afraid that the truth about human compatibility with Nexian technology will undermine the very foundation of your civilization, the belief in Nexian superiority. Miles could see the commander processing this, weighing the implications against his orders and beliefs. He pressed his advantage. I propose an alternative to bloodshed. Take me to your ship. Let your scientists examine me. Verify for yourself what I've become. If I'm lying, you can execute me as ordered. If I'm telling the truth, perhaps there's another path forward than the war your emperor is planning. The commander was silent for a long moment. Then, how do I know this isn't a trap? I will come alone, unarmed, Miles said. And to show good faith, I'll help you verify my claims immediately. He reached out with his mind, connecting to the Nexian ship in orbit. It was more distant than anything he'd attempted before, but the nanites amplified his reach. On the screen, the commander's eyes widened as alerts sounded on his bridge. What are you doing? How are you accessing our systems? I'm not sabotaging anything, Miles assured him. Just proving what I can do. Check your long-range sensors. I've calibrated them to detect the specific neural signature the nanites have created in my brain. You'll find no other signatures like it on this planet. Confirmation that I am indeed unique. The commander turned to someone off-screen, received confirmation, then faced Miles again with new respect and wariness in his expression. Very well, human. You will be brought aboard for examination. But be warned, any deception, any hostile action, will result in the immediate destruction of this colony. Understood, Miles said. I'll meet your shuttle at the main entrance to the research facility in 10 minutes. The transmission ended. Hayes stared at Miles with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Have you lost your mind? You're delivering yourself to the enemy. No, Miles said calmly. I'm creating an opportunity. The Nexians need to see what I've become, not as a weapon to be used against them, but as a bridge between our species. You're being naive, Hayes insisted. They'll dissect you to learn your secrets, then use that knowledge against us. Perhaps, Miles acknowledged. But I'm betting that not all Nexians share the Emperor's supremacist views. Velan didn't. There must be others. He turned to Dr. Parker. You've been working with Velan for years. Do you believe all Nexians want war with humanity? Dr. Parker shook her head slowly. No. Many are curious about us, even admiring. It's primarily the Imperial family and their loyalists who see us as a threat. Then there's hope, Miles said. He held out his hand to Hayes. I need to do this, General. It may be our best chance to prevent a war neither side truly wants. Hayes hesitated, then grudgingly shook Miles' hand. I think you're making a mistake, but it's your life to risk. As Miles prepared to leave the bunker, Dr. Parker pulled him aside. The nanites' integration will continue, she warned. Your abilities may grow, evolve in ways we can't predict. Remember who you are, Miles. Remember your humanity. It may be your greatest strength. Miles nodded, feeling the weight of what he was about to do. If this works, I'll try to establish communication. Let you know what I've learned. And if it doesn't? Dr. Parker asked softly. Miles managed to smile. Then I guess I'll have gone from janitor to martyr in record time. The Nexian battlecruiser Indomitable hung in orbit above Terran Colony Epsilon, its sleek, angular form a stark contrast to the more utilitarian human vessels docked at the colony's spaceport. From his position in the ship's scientific research bay, Miles could see the curve of the planet through a viewport, a beautiful blue-green world that now seemed very far away. Commander Thalen, no relation to Miles' former supervisor, he had been relieved to discover, stood with his senior science officer, reviewing the results of their initial examinations. It is as he claims, the science officer reported, her cranial ridges pulsing with excitement she was trying to suppress. The nanites have integrated with his neural architecture in a way that should be impossible for a non-Nexian. They've created pathways similar to those found in Nexian brain structure, but with modifications that appear to enhance rather than simply mimic our capabilities. Phelan's expression remained skeptical. How is this possible? The Aqua Lumina nanites are specifically encoded to our genetic signature. That is where it becomes complicated, Commander, the science officer replied. choosing her words carefully. Our analysis indicates that certain aspects of human neural architecture bear remarkable similarities to ancient Nexian patterns, ones that predate our technological augmentation programs. Are you suggesting there is some connection between humans and Nexians? Some common ancestry? Phelan's ridges pulsed with disbelief. The evidence is preliminary, but yes, that is one possibility we must consider. Miles, who had been following the conversation while pretending not to understand their language, decided it was time to abandon the pretense. There's another possibility, he said in perfect Nexian, startling both officers. One that your Emperor finds even more disturbing. Not that humans and Nexians share a common past, but that humans represent what Nexians might have become without technological intervention. Your evolutionary future, not your past. Phelan turned to him, anger and fascination warring in his expression. You understand our language. How much of our conversation did you comprehend? All of it, Miles replied. The Nanites have given me access to Nexian linguistic databases, among other things. I apologize for the deception, but I needed to understand your true reactions to the examination results. The science officer approached him with undisguised fascination. The integration appears to be continuing. Your neural activity has increased by 17% since you came aboard. She hesitated, then asked, Is it painful? Miles considered the question. The pressure in his skull had intensified, and occasional flashes of pain still shot through his temples, but they were becoming less frequent. Less than it was. I think my brain is adapting. Remarkable, she murmured. A human brain, adapting to Nexian technology. The implications are significant. Significant enough that your Emperor was willing to risk war to keep it secret, Miles pointed out. He didn't just want me dead because I interfered with his plans. He wanted to eliminate the evidence of what the Aqua Lumina revealed, that humans and Nexians are more compatible than anyone realized. Phelan paced the research bay, his posture betraying his internal conflict. Even if what you say is true, why would the Emperor conceal such information? The diplomatic and scientific advantages of closer cooperation between our species would be considerable. Because it undermines the foundation of Nexian supremacy, Miles said simply. If humans represent a viable evolutionary path, one that leads to greater adaptability and innovation, less dependence on technological enhancement, then the choices made by the imperial lineage thousands of years ago might be seen as a mistake, a dead end rather than advancement. The science officer's ridges pulsed with alarm. Such speculation borders on sedition, human. Perhaps, Miles acknowledged. But consider this. The Nanites in the Aqua Lumina were designed to share knowledge, to connect minds through shared understanding. That they can bond with human neural tissue suggests our minds are fundamentally compatible, despite our different evolutionary paths. He stood, moving toward a display showing his neural scans. Look at the patterns forming in my brain. They're not Nexian, not human, but something in between, a hybrid that takes elements from both. What if that's not an aberration, but a glimpse of what's possible? Not conquest, not subjugation, but synthesis. Phelan studied the scans, his expression thoughtful. You speak of possibilities that contradict millennia of Nexian history and policy. The Emperor would never accept such a radical reframing of our relationship with humanity. The current Emperor, no, Miles agreed. But I've accessed enough of your historical archives through the Nanites to know that imperial policy has changed before. When new evidence emerges, when circumstances shift. A subtle alert chimed on Phelan's communicator. He checked it, his expression growing grave. It seems our time for philosophical discussion is at an end. The Emperor's personal envoy has arrived to take custody of you. His four eyes fixed on Miles. Whatever truth you've discovered, human, I fear it may die with you. Miles felt a cold knot form in his stomach. I thought you were going to verify my claims before deciding my fate. I have verified enough to find your words disquieting, Phelan replied. But my orders come directly from the celestial throne. I cannot disobey. The door to the research bay slid open, revealing a figure Miles recognized instantly from the Nanites' collective memory. Imperial Executor Kren, the Emperor's most feared enforcer. Tall even for a Nexian, With jet-black armor that seemed to absorb light and cranial ridges modified to form a crown-like structure, Kryn was an imposing presence. "Commander Thalen," the executor acknowledged with barely a nod. "I will relieve you of your guest." Thalen bowed deeply. "Of course, executor. We have conducted preliminary examinations as ordered. The results are irrelevant," Kryn dismissed. "The human is to be transported to the homeworld immediately for proper disposal." Miles noticed the science officer flinch at the casual brutality of Kryn's words. There was his opening. Not everyone in the Nexian hierarchy was comfortable with the Emperor's methods. "Before I'm disposed of," Miles said, keeping his voice steady, "perhaps the executor would like to know what I've learned from the Eternal Fountain? Knowledge that might be lost forever if I die." Kryn's gaze shifted to Miles, his eyes cold and calculating. "The nanites will be recovered from your remains and reintegrated into the fountain. No knowledge will be lost." "That's not entirely accurate," Miles countered. "The nanites have bonded with my neural pathways in a unique way. They're not just storing information now. They're creating new connections, new understandings. Kill me, and you lose not just what I've learned, but what I'm becoming." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Kryn's features. "What you're becoming is an anomaly. A dangerous one." "Dangerous to whom?" Miles pressed. "To the galaxy? Or to the Emperor's carefully constructed narrative of Nexian superiority?" Kryn's hand moved to the weapon at his side. "You presume much, human." "I know much," Miles corrected. "For instance, I know that the Imperial family has been gradually increasing their own nanite enhancements for generations, trying to stay ahead of the growing signs of genetic stagnation in the Nexian population. I know that birth rates have been declining for centuries despite technological interventions. And I know that the Emperor's own health is failing due to unforeseen complications from experimental nanite treatments. Information kept secret from even his highest advisors." The research bay went utterly silent. Thalen and the science officer stared at Miles in shock. Kryn's hand tightened on his weapon. "How could you possibly know that?" the executor demanded, his voice barely above a whisper. "The Aqua Lumina contains the collective knowledge of the Nexian people," Miles explained, "including information the Imperial family thought was secure. The nanites didn't discriminate when they integrated with my brain. They gave me access to everything, even the secrets the Emperor has been hiding from his own people." Kryn drew his weapon, aiming it directly at Miles' head. "Then you definitely cannot be allowed to live." Miles didn't flinch. Instead, he reached out with his mind, connecting to the ship's systems. The lights flickered as he disabled Kryn's weapon with a thought. "Kill me, and you lose the one thing that might save your species," Miles said calmly. In that moment, the nanites completed their final integration. Miles gasped as knowledge coalesced. Not just information, but understanding. He saw the truth. Nexians and humans were evolutionary cousins, separated by millions of years, but following parallel paths. The nanites hadn't just given him Nexian knowledge. They'd created a perfect synthesis of both species' neural architectures. "You need me," Miles continued, "because I've become what neither of our species could achieve alone, a bridge between human adaptability and Nexian technological mastery." The ship suddenly rocked as Imperial vessels appeared in orbit. The Emperor himself had arrived. "It's too late," Kryn said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "It's never too late to choose a different path," Miles replied. He turned to Thalen. "Commander, you've seen the evidence. What future do you want for your people? Endless war, or a new beginning?" Before Thalen could answer, the Emperor's voice boomed through the ship's communication system, demanding Miles' immediate surrender. Miles made his decision. He closed his eyes, reaching farther than he ever had before, to every Nexian ship in orbit, to the colony below, to communication relays that would carry his message across the galaxy. Through this vast network, he shared everything. The truth about human Nexian compatibility, the Emperor's deceptions, and a vision of cooperation instead of conflict. Not just information, but experience, the emotional weight of discovery, the wonder of synthesis, the hope for a shared future. The Emperor's forces faltered as their crews received Miles' transmission. On the view screen, the Imperial flagship stopped its advance. 3 months later, the Galactic Concordat reconvened. Miles stood before representatives of 100 species, his presence a living testament to possibility. The Emperor had been deposed in a bloodless revolution, replaced by a transitional council that included both Nexians and humans. Today marks not an ending, but a beginning, Miles addressed the assembly. What happened to me was an accident, but it revealed a truth too powerful to suppress, that different paths can converge, that evolution has more than one expression of excellence. He looked out at the diverse gathering, former enemies now cautious allies, and smiled. We stand at the threshold of a new era, not Nexian, not human, but something greater than either could achieve alone. The Concordat erupted in applause as Miles Harper, once a janitor, now a bridge between worlds, took his place in galactic history. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.